Good evening. Thank you all for being here. We are going to be chatting with Nicola Rose, the director of Magnetosphere. Thank you for being here and taking this time with us to talk about everything.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and thank you to the group for watching it. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a really cute movie, and you know, seeing synesthesia represented, that was a really interesting thing because it's something that we don't really see a lot in media. I personally don't experience synesthesia, but I know people who have, and like I've had someone actually like color, like do a MS Paint like picture of my voice, which is really interesting. And
Wow,
like
like the way they saw your
way they,
something.
yeah, the sound of my voice. So it was really interesting to kind of see that represented on screen. So what kind of led you to doing a movie about something like synesthesia?
Well, you make a good point, which is like, why has this not been represented more? And it has been represented like on film and on TV. Like, I'm definitely not the first person to bring synesthesia into the media. But it's surprisingly underportrayed. You don't see it a lot, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that a lot of people who, it's actually pretty common, but a lot of people who have it don't necessarily realize they have it because it's not as if they're going around talking about it or necessarily even realizing that it's a neurodivergence because unlike something like ADHD or something like different autism spectrum disorders, it might not actually interfere with your daily life. I speaking as somebody who does apparently have ADHD because I just got diagnosed this year. But there are certainly ways in which I find that can interfere with just sort of daily goings on. And with synesthesia, um, it's less. I don't want to say it doesn't interfere with people's lives because it absolutely does. I want to be clear about that. I've met people who have, you know, who have had synesthesia that really like affects them adversely, and they've talked to me about it. And some of that is represented in the film the way they described it. I tried to stay very faithful to, a very small set of descriptions. Long story short, I think a lot of people don't know they have synesthesia, and I think that's why it's not more represented and more common and more mainstream in the media. But more and more people do seem to know about it and be aware of it. And when I go to screenings of this movie, or if I go to an event where I happen to be talking about it, or what have you, um, people do seem to pop up who they're like, "Oh, I have that," or like my niece has that. They know somebody. They always there's always at least somebody who knows somebody who experiences synesthesia in some way. So I think it's becoming more and better known, and there are certainly other and more mainstream depictions of it, in the media. So I'm not the first, but I'm hoping that the movie gains a lot of followers, I should say viewers, both neurodiverse and neurotypical who want to better understand what this thing is. And so it dropped on streaming a couple weeks ago on Prime Video and on Apple TV in North America and several other streaming services. So, hopefully, as the word gets out, more people will be seeing it.
Yeah, no, I think you mentioned like you're not the first, and I mean I personally haven't been able, like I can't recall off the top of my head of like movies that I've seen with that representation, at least so overtly. And I think that's another thing with other types of representation with like ADHD, autism. There are now some overt like representations where you, like a character,
Actually,
like
say it.
yes,
Yeah.
they he says they are autistic, or like you know but I'm trying to think of like, yeah, there might have been some implied or uh
Coded or yeah.
uses of synesthesia, but it's not overtly said like this is synesthesia, or is represented in a way that's a bit more fantastical, you know.
Well, I think because it is very easy to sort of not realize that that's what you're depicting, because I think a lot of people who experience this or who have this just sort of, they don't necessarily question it if it's not, as I say, adversely affecting them. They just sort of take it for granted as part of their daily mental landscape. And I don't think it becomes more, um, I don't think they necessarily know that it's a neurodivergence. It's
Yeah.
just part of the day.
Yeah, that is true. And you said you talked to people, so I'm assuming like you went out and talked before, like doing the film. Was there anything that kind of like stuck out to you about people's experience with synesthesia that like you really wanted to represent in this movie?
Well, I was a little limited in terms of what I could really represent on screen in order to get the idea across in a way that was very direct, because synesthesia can kind of exist on all the senses, and there are so many potential crossovers between the senses, and some of them are a lot harder to depict on film or TV than others, like stuff like there's a kind of synesthesia that's called lexical gustatory, which is where people will taste like words or taste numbers. And you could do that. You could set yourself the challenge of representing that in the cinema, on screen, on TV. But I think that's a lot harder than sort of the more straightforward visual auditory or auditory to visual, visual to auditory
Hmm.
manifestations of synesthesia. It's like, let's just start out with the more, I don't want to say obvious, but the types of synesthesia that are easier to communicate through storytelling that's in a visual medium.
Yeah,
It
I
just
mean,
are made for TV, for film.
yeah, I can imagine, trying to depict certain things that are not overtly like visual, like tasting words or oh, that your words taste like bananas, or
People
something.
talking. I mean,
Yeah,
there's some way with visual effects, with VFX, there's definitely some way that I'm not
yeah,
this moment being creative enough to think of, but there's definitely some way to depict it, but I think that it's not the go-to. It shouldn't be the go-to.
yeah. I mean, I guess that's kind of a good kind of leadway is like, what was some of the most like challenging aspects of this film of like getting these things represented? Like, did you face like, how am I going to do this, or like, what did you have to hurdle through?
I do remember that feeling of how am I going to represent? Because it's really easy if you're not worrying about it feeling authentic.
Yeah,
Because like it's really easy to just like if you've never experienced some neurodivergence, if you've never experienced ADHD, if you've never experienced synesthesia, it's so easy to just be really irresponsible and depict them willy-nilly as however you kind of imagine it must be. And that's not responsible and it's not authentic representation. So you really, you're going to pay really dearly for that. Ultimately, you don't want to
yeah.
do it, even though it's the easiest way out. So what I did, the first step, and this was like way before the movie was funded or way before actors were necessarily attached to it, anything like that, was I went to sort of the best watering hole of primary sources that I could find, which was a Facebook group for people with synesthesia. And I asked, would anybody here want to talk to me about what your experience is like? And I figured I'd hear from a couple people because, who has that kind of time? But they were very generous. I think I heard from like 70 people.
Oh wow.
And yeah, it was more than I could. I think I like communicated with all of them, but ultimately I had to kind of winnow down that group to,
Yeah.
a few folks that first of all, not everybody had the kind of synesthesia that I was trying to depict. And second of all, some people seemed a little closer to the model for the character. I mean, there was one actual teenage girl that I was put in touch with, and who not only she was similar in, age and sort of general life experience to the character being depicted in the movie, but she also had several different kinds of synesthesia, including some that were not all, the way that people who are neurotypical might assume it is of like sunshine and rainbows and sparkles. And yes, it's very lovely, but that's not the only thing that's going on. It's like there are also things that could give you migraines, that give you nausea, that could give you cramps, that could give you, vertigo, all sorts of things that could be quite negative. And this girl experienced, I don't remember at this point all of what she experienced, but it was fascinating because there was a great deal of it that was negative as well as, positive and visual and
Mhm.
interesting. And so she was kind of one of my role models. I shouldn't say kind of. She was one of my role models for Maggie, the character, as well as a few other people. And I wanted to make sure to depict, there's no way to be right or like accurate about what you're depicting. You can only be authentic versus inauthentic. So there was a lot of trying to, I don't draw very well, so I had an artist who would try to depict these things in sort of sketch form, and then I would kind of run it by the synesthetes and say, okay, is this kind of like something you experience, or is this kind of like something you experience? Just try to get it as authentic feeling as possible, so it wasn't somebody with just like rainbows coming out of her eyes or like
Yeah.
whatever.
I,
And go ahead.
no, it's great that you actually worked with people with the experience and like checked in with them and kind of explored the different aspects of it. Because I think with all like neurodivergence experiences, it's really hard to, like you said, give it right because a lot of them have different experiences. It can be presented or like especially with like ADHD and autism, right? Like there are so many different experiences within both ADHD and autism.
Yeah, I
You
can't
know,
imagine.
you can only represent so much, but it's great that you did actually, went and like worked. And like you said, it's very authentic. And I,
Yeah,
through watching the film, like I can see like how, you did approach it, through that experience. And, there were depictions of like how it can be overwhelming and how, it's not just like you said, seeing pretty pictures or, colors all the time. Um,
there is
and
some of that, obviously, but
yeah,
yeah, it's not like necessarily the main thing that people are experiencing.
yeah, and that's great. And we have someone in chat saying like they really love that the doctor who diagnosed her was very kind and like
Yes.
reinforcing that there's nothing wrong with her. Um, and I think that's a great representation too of like neurodivergence because a lot of people feel like these things are defects. Yeah, and I really like that message of like nothing is wrong.
Nothing is actually wrong. I think society, neurotypical society, has done neurodivergent people a huge disservice by making them feel like the exception, the other, as though there is some sort of, as though somehow there's a defect. And here you have this character who is 13 years old. She has like almost zero life experience. And by nature, she's cautious, she's worried, she's timid, she's not sure she should tell her parents or like anybody except her little sister, what she's experiencing. She tells her friend. Ultimately, she tells more people, but that's kind of over the course of the movie as we meet her. And so it seemed to me that the first thing that she would ask the doctor is like, am I going to be okay? Because I think in her head, she might be like, can you die from this?
Yeah.
Because it's like, to us, it seems obvious. It's like we're not 13 and we're not like hearing about neurodiversity for the first time. And it's much more part of the conversation um, globally, really. It's just that, here also you're dealing with somebody, what's being depicted as 25 years ago. And it wasn't so much part of, like I say, I was born in 1988. I didn't get a diagnosis of ADHD until this just this year. I think that's for a couple reasons. I think, first of all, I don't think I always had it. I think it was later onset. But also, I think, what now might be seen as ADHD at the time that we were children or, might earlier on might simply have been seen as, oh, you're weird and you're different and you're bad and just like a bad kid, because you like talk differently and think differently than other people. And,
Yeah.
all I really knew is, oh, I'm always uncomfortable. And I think that was for a variety of reasons, but that could have factored in for sure.
Yeah, and kind of touching on like your experience with neurodivergence, and what I do, through Dueling Minds is kind of like provide that support and awareness for both ADHD and autism. And it's funny that you said like, well, I don't know if I've always had ADHD, and
Oh, I don't know.
the thing is like, through like research that we have now is like ADHD is it's genetic, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder, and it is something that people are born with, and so but a lot of people that experience late diagnosis kind of have those same feelings of like, well, I don't know, like if I've always been this or whatever.
Oh,
But
interesting.
but
Okay.
it's because for one, information on ADHD and autism, like you said, like 25 years ago was not great, right? Like we didn't have a lot of
Sure.
great
Yeah.
resources. And actually, in the case of like women, there has been a lot of like kind of discriminatory practices in the sense of like a lot of research was focused on young white boys.
Yeah. Well,
So
those are the subjects that
yeah,
people like, not that they had, but that they went to.
yeah. So women were overlooked more often, and so the diagnostic rate for women is actually a lot lower than it should be. So, and I think what happens to a lot of late diagnosed people, especially myself, was we developed all these different coping mechanisms and ways to function that we masked, right? We camouflaged our
Everything's a coping
yeah,
mechanism.
we camouflaged our experiences to the point that we didn't realize like
Yeah.
these were things that like were not part of the typical experience. So yeah, it's one of those interesting things of like when you're growing up and if you don't have the right information, then how are you supposed to support yourself or even understand what's happening? And I do like, in the movie, she's very confused and went through that kind of like information finding kind of and like getting that diagnosis.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and kind of going back to like the ADHD, you've been, in making films around since 2015, getting into the industry, going through all of these really high stress environment, and which the entertainment industry is like. What kind of has been your experience as a neurodivergent person, like making this film and just kind of going through the process of like getting something produced, like all the marketing that you have to do, all the work that you have to go through?
Well, my the way my mind works, if something really interests me, like promoting a film, for example, I can hyper focus on that. My attention is not going to divert from that the way that it might divert from things that I have to do, but that I'm not interested in. I can't speak for other people. This might be something that's, some people are only interested in the creative aspect of, for example, making a movie or writing a book. And then things like promotion are just sort of, oh my God, I have to do this too. It's like, this is
Yeah.
not, it's not natural to them, which I understand because it's not really a natural thing. It really just, I learn more with each passing project about ways in which I do and don't handle stress well. And I would say this project was particularly stressful, but I think I'm happy with the results. I'm happy with the outcome. My first feature, that was an interesting one on a couple of counts. Goodbye Petrushka, which is out there streaming on Tubi and Prime and a bunch of others, Google Play. The thing about that movie, that was, I don't want to say it was my film school because I had done and made a bunch of short form things before then that kind of prepared me to make that, but it that was the one that really taught me about the kind of stress that you're going to have to go through to make a full-length film, to be on set of a full-length film, and what that's going to what that's going to demand of you. And it was interesting in a second respect as well, which is that it going back to neurodiversity for a second, which is that that movie was not necessarily, I should say this actually more clearly. That movie was not intended to be about a neurodivergent character, but it got interpreted that way by um, many neurodivergent people who happened to see it. And I started hearing from autistic women saying, "Oh my gosh, finally, an autistic girl is represented." And I was kind of like, "Oh, okay." I this wasn't necessarily where I was going with that, but you know, if I look at it, I haven't looked at it for a while. I don't tend to like go back and watch my own work, certainly not for fun and not past when I have to festivals. But yeah, you don't even have to look very hard to see it. It is right there. So I think it's just as kind of how the character came out on.
So when writing that character, like, were you pulling from like your own personal experience or perspectives, or was it just kind of like a happenstance type thing?
My own experiences, yes. The character is not really based on me, but the circumstances she finds herself in are based on a series of circumstances I was in my late teens, early 20s, I think early 20s. And if I had actually made the story literally what that was like, it would have been the most boring thing on earth. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a work of fiction, but it you know, I wonder if I won't look back at it in like 10 or 20 years and be like, oh yeah, no, I definitely based this on how I reacted to things. I think there's a fair amount of distance from me. I think I used circumstances that I knew because they made for a good and an interesting story, but um, I wasn't necessarily trying to depict a neurodivergent character. And then yeah, it turns out I probably can't avoid that. So that was a lesson from that.
It's actually interesting because you said you were diagnosed ADHD recently, and like creatively, we tend to put pieces of ourselves regardless of our intent. And so like looking back at previous works, and even myself, like I've written things in the past, and I'm like, oh, like, why didn't I know sooner, right? Of like my
Yeah,
neurodivergence, of like, oh yeah, like
that's
that's
fun.
kind
Yeah.
of like, it's kind of interesting to see that kind of thing. And like, even though if it wasn't intentional, it's still good to have like representation, because there's yeah, there's been other experience, like things I've read of like, I'm forgetting his name, but the writer for Community, uh,
Yeah.
um,
And whom I can't think of now that you've said it. Oh my gosh.
yeah, like Abed was a self-insert character, and
Yes.
he was not aware of his neurodivergence when he did that, and then through writing that character, he got diagnosed. So it's really interesting to see that in the entertainment industry. Um, have you, like, through your experience, like, appreciated like your, like, just kind of your perspective of things, of like how you're able to navigate the industry, where other people may have struggled, or have there been struggles for you where other people may have like not been fine?
They're probably, I mean, it's hard to say how other people would have reacted. That's where I kind
Yeah.
of fall short of knowing, but I sort of assume that many of the places where I struggle that other people might not have, and many of the places where I don't that other people may have, just because I figure that's probably the rule. That we tend to have those of us who have, this is not to say, oh, neurodivergent people are more special or something like that.
Yeah.
We're not, but I just tend to figure that we have very individualized sort of experiences that probably other folks are not going to duplicate exactly.
Yeah.
um yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you found the same thing, that maybe some of the specifics of what you experience and what you do are not necessarily widely relatable, but
Yeah, I
um
think, in some of my kind of experiences, like creatively, I find that some people without my experience may be able to, um, I guess, do not necessarily do more, but be more consistent right?
Yeah.
Because like I can burn out quickly. I can,
Oh, yeah.
I have to a little bit take my time a little bit more on certain things. Um, my memory is not as good. So like I used to do like slam poetry, performance poetry, spoken word,
Yeah.
and so like having to memorize things was a challenge for me. That was something that was really really difficult, and you know,
Understand.
so like there were certain things that like there were challenges, but doesn't mean I couldn't do it, but more of like observing how other people operated. I was like, oh, like, I had a friend that literally could edit his poetry in his brain. Like he would write in his brain, and like, cause we collaborated on a poem together, and he didn't have anything written down. And he would just like, he'd be like, hold on a second. And he'll be like, okay, and it'd be completely different. And he's like editing in his brain. I'm like, how? Like that's magic to me.
That's magic to me too. And I can do that to an extent. Like I can imagine it. I can be like, oh, I want it to be like this. I want to write that down. But actually getting from there to remembering it to write it down, there's a huge disconnect in there for me. Like I'm probably not going to remember it.
Yeah,
If I don't have my phone or pen and paper right then and there, I'm probably not going to be able to get it down.
yeah. Like for me, like even from the thought to writing it down, I can forget.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
like like and it's like 5 seconds have passed, right? And but like he literally like I would have to like, dude, I need you to write your part down so like I have it. And he like, okay, I'll write it down. Like he hardly ever wrote anything down. And I was like, that's amazing to me. And I know like that's not an everyone experience, but like
No,
it
I mean
was,
it's very individual, but
yeah, but like just being able to see both sides of that, right? Of like someone who has a memory like that to me who has a memory of a goldfish. You know,
I've been struggling with that whole memory thing for various reasons for the past year, so I feel that, and
yeah,
it is, it's distressing. It's like you trouble remembering what you need to put on your grocery list. It's like
yeah,
how do people be creative and remember what they want to create? I mean, my God,
yeah. And
it's
so creatively, creativity is something. Yeah, words that can be difficult also.
words are
It,
tough.
yes.
I have this experience daily. Don't feel bad.
I mean, and that's also, I mean, it's part of our neurodivergence. Like, it's really interesting
I will
when
switch
you,
words, switch
yeah,
sounds of words within a sentence, and yeah.
it, like how brains function, right, is very interesting, and that's why I'm very intrigued in like the movie that you did with synesthesia, because it's like, oh, that's a fascinating like experience, and just understanding that there are so many different experiences out there,
I
and
Yeah, I've been sort of astounded by how many people it's resonating with who, as soon as it did come out and as soon as it was on streaming, which has been about 3 weeks now, it was on, several major platforms, Prime and so forth, so making it available to a lot of people. I started seeing these reviews, both, community reviews and professional reviews of people who it was really strongly resonating with. And it's not necessarily that these particular folks like had synesthesia. Maybe they did, or maybe they didn't, but there was something that was singing their song. There was some way in which they felt weird or different, or they really got what it was about. And I was not expecting that. I was actually expecting like, huh? Which there's going to be that too, and that's fine. That happens.
yeah.
Yeah, I was really pleasantly surprised.
So, with this movie, I know you're still in the, marketing and getting it pushed out, and you're kind of taking a
And
much needed, yeah, much needed break right now.
yeah.
Like, do you have any like future plans for different stories that you would love to see represented, especially as you now are diagnosed,
Yeah.
and like have a little bit more awareness of your own experience? Like, is there anything that you would really want to represent better in the industry?
You know, there are, I think about this a lot, and I think about it in terms of writing more than I think about it in terms of movie making, simply because the overhead involved in making even the simplest and smallest of movies. And believe it or not, that's not Magnetosphere. Magnetosphere is, it is tiny, but it is not the tiniest. There are many levels down from there in terms of tiny. Um, I think about, I think my mind has sort of migrated from, at least of recent date, it's migrated from movie making to more directing and writing, more to just writing. And I would love to, I would love to both write and to see written more things that are from the points of view of people who experience these different kinds of neurodivergences, whether it's ADHD, whether it's synesthesia, whether it's both, because they tend to go together, whether it's autism, whether it's, these skills that you mentioned, like being able to edit like on the fly in your head, like I kind of want to see that guy's story written down, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Or poetry, I think you said he did, but
Yeah.
and one of the places that you see that a lot, starting relatively recently, is on Substack, where a lot of people write stuff. Who, there's no barrier to entry, which is both good and bad, and it's mostly good, I think, because it tends to be people who love to write and people who love to read who show up there. And not surprisingly, there's a ton of neurodivergent people among, their numbers. And so many of those people blog and write about sort of life from their point of view, and it's fascinating. And it kind of makes me want to both read and write more nonfiction that has to do with you know, um, that's to do with the points of view of different kinds of neurotypes, not necessarily all things that I personally can depict, but that's why I want to say both reading and writing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I understand the difficulty of filmmaking. I was a part of the very tiny at one point myself, and even
Yeah.
that was challenging. I did like the
Tinier, they
low,
are more challenging in a way.
yeah, super low budget B horror movies is what I've been a part of, where we would take one weekend to film an entire movie.
Oof. Yeah.
So those were like 12 to 16-hour days,
I
just
don't know how people do it. I do not know how people do this.
it was challenging. And like, like, because I've dabbled in different points of like entertainment and performance and things like that. And this was all prior to my diagnosis as well. And I think at times I'm like, how did I do that?
Yeah.
um
Yeah, you
I,
don't know looking back. It's
yeah. like that was me, like thinking about that, like, could I do that again?
yeah.
And it's really interesting because like my awareness is risen, and I'm able to support myself better. But there are some things I'm like, I don't know if I could do that again. I don't know if I could really like push through that experience. So I guess, is that kind of like same thing with like the filmmaking aspect of it? Like, do you find that's a challenge that's like, is it worth it to you? Because like, the effect that it might have had on you as a like someone that's ADHD.
You know, when I was a lot younger, I think I was better able to handle a lot of overstimulation without feeling it quite so much. So
Mhm.
as I get older, the more I think maybe I am better suited to doing things that don't require so much, so many team members, so much interaction all the time. I mean, I'm still a social person. It's not that I'm not. I like being with people. I like making things with other people, but um, I would be lying if I said that I didn't feel more attracted to writing and less attracted to like directing stuff. I was like, there's a reason for that. As I
Yeah.
get older, I don't know if you found that like the older you get, that the more you find, oh yeah, I'm not really able to take in as much as I could. Like, how did I do things? How did I go to college? How did I do anything?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Like
yeah.
I think I have the same sentiment of, I used to work 60-hour weeks, was a salesperson, was able talking to people. Again, I'm a social person as well. Like,
Uh,
I am more extroverted than I am introverted, but I do value my quiet introverted
yeah.
times, a lot more now than I did when I was younger. And like, I still want to be, I guess, the face of things. Like I love doing what we're doing now, like the interviews, talking to
Yeah, talking
people,
about yeah.
and I really enjoy being the representative for like Dueling Minds and like going to conventions and like doing talks at conventions. But
I love that kind of stuff.
yeah, but that also gives me the freedom to like go hide in a hotel room if I need to. Like I
Really
can
important. It's
I
like,
can
how far is
remove
my Airbnb? I need to get
yeah.
back there.
So I can remove myself if I need to. Like before I would just like brute force through it and then
Yeah.
I would be really exhausted and I didn't know why. You know.
Yes, I
Um
make no connection between these things.
yes. It's like, oh, everyone's tired after, all of that. It's like, no.
Yeah, really.
But
It's yeah, it is. These things can be brutally tiring, and yeah, I suppose, I'm gonna have a different take on it yet again in like 10, 20 years, but certainly earlier on, and that's why I question how long has the ADHD been there, but I think you raise an important point. It's probably always been around. It's probably just more that you deal with things differently the younger you are or the older you get.
yeah, I think, when it comes to both ADHD and autism, they are neurodevelopmental. So it's something that a person is born with.
Yeah.
And where a lot of people are late diagnosed, and this is myself included, is like because the way we were raised in like ways to actually camouflage our experiences, or our experiences were dismissed so much that we just automatically assumed that our experiences were normal and we just needed to like pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, that kind of mentality, which is can be really harmful for growing up, and like that leads to burnout, that leads to that overwhelm. Because I know for myself, like there was about 4 or 5 years ago, I really really crashed and I burnt out to the point where like for like 8 months I did nothing because I couldn't.
Yeah.
um and so that's part of kind of our experience, and what usually leads to us getting diagnosed is like things are affecting us in ways that we're not used to, but that's because the mask and camouflage that we have is starting to slip and break down because like we've been doing it for so long.
Yeah, the longer you do it, the harder it gets to maintain.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's one of those things, and I think it's important, to showcase those experiences, like you said, in either writing or, like for me, like if I were to ever make a movie, I think that experience of a person, growing up and having to camouflage, and then that breaking point of what that can, how that can affect someone, those are stories and perception I think are really important, because a lot of people dismiss our experiences, or like, oh, you're just being lazy, or
Or
you're
dramatic.
yeah, you're making
Get attention.
excuses. Yeah, you just need to, if you could just focus, um
Yeah. We heard a lot about focusing and about that I was trying to get all the attention, and so that nobody else would get any. When I was much younger, when I was a kid, when it was adults in charge of me, of whatever I was doing. And yeah, I look back on that now and see that through a bit of a different lens, because I can tell you from my point of view, I was never trying to get attention that wasn't due me. I was never trying to get attention away from other people, or, I never thought I was better than other people, which is something that I get told to this day. Oh, you think you're better than,
mhm.
no, like, no, I don't have anything else to say about that. I just don't. I'm
Yeah,
definitely not better than other people.
yeah, and I think it's, that can be part of our experience with like the social interaction aspect of it, where people misinterpret our experiences.
Oh, yeah.
And Um, so yeah, and I think this is actually a good question that was asked in chat just now. Was what actually led to you getting your diagnosis? I know you said it's only been about a year. So what
Yeah,
was kind of like breaking point?
I was working with a therapist, working with a really wonderful psychiatrist, and needed some meds for something else. And I said, while we're at it, I'm wondering if you would test me. I just asked, could you test me for? I wondered if I was autistic, and I suspected I was not for a number of reasons. But I was, and my cat joining me now, I don't know. I don't think he's quite in the frame here, but he's definitely on the spectrum in many ways. But all cats are on the spectrum. What I was going to say was, so it was like for completely unrelated, like other medical stuff, but it was, it was, uh, it was just like, well, while we're here, I asked, could you test me for both autism and ADHD? And autism, pretty much 100% don't have. There are some things that I basically it's like they ask you 15 questions, and I find them a little problematic because they don't actually cover all experiences and so
Mhm.
forth. They're very open to 100 different interpretations. I can't think of a good example right now. Some are more straightforward. You have clothing sensitivity, and in my case, I don't, not really. Um, I I forget. I think I only answered positively to like two or three out of the 15 things. So it's like, oh, it turns out I don't. I didn't think I did, but I wanted to know just in case because,
Mhm.
by the time you're like in your 30s, you definitely know like something's different because you can see from both the inside and the outside. And I think when you're a kid, you only see from the inside. You don't have the ability to like look in from without and be like, here's what other people are seeing. You really can't, which is both good and bad.
Yeah. So,
Um, Go ahead.
was there anything in
I
like
came out positive on ADHD.
I mean, was there anything that like you said you kind of had, suspicions? Like, was there just like a lot of things that you just came across? You're like, oh, I wonder, or was this just like, was there anything that's kind of stood out to you?
Um, I was getting extremely forgetful and I was fidgeting all the time. I have a left leg fidget that happens no matter what I'm doing. It needs to happen. There are other things that I guess would qualify as stimming, that were happening more and more as the stresses, associated with different projects I was doing became more. And I've never focused real well on things that I'm not interested in, but I was really getting to the point where I could not. I've never been able to do one thing at a time without doing other things at the same. I can't do one thing at a time. I always have to be doing two, three things at a time.
Yeah.
It's almost pathological. It's constant. And, some people would say, oh, this is actually going to adversely affect your work. And in my case, it doesn't. I mean, obviously, there's exceptions. There's times that you're directing a scene, you can only be focused on that. But most of the time, it's like I, I can never be engaged in just one activity. I was just telling somebody about this. I knew somebody who I don't ever want to assume anybody's totally neurotypical, but this person I believe was. I knew somebody who could, for example, watch a television show and just like sit there, arms folded, no device in front of her, no drawing paper, no nothing, no fidget, any nothing, and just like eyes on that television show, no matter how dull it is. It could be a game show. I am going to watch this game show and I'm going to watch each one of the commercials, and my eyes are focused all the time on this thing. And I remember, I'm not neither saying this is good nor bad. I just remember it creeped me out. I was like, how can you do that? How can you
Yeah.
other stuff? And um because and I also have gotten called out on it so many times over the years, like, why can't you just focus on this one thing? By anytime I have lived with somebody and or been in close proximity to somebody for a long time, it's like, well, why do you need to be doing both those things? Why can't you just do one thing? It's kind of always been there.
Yeah. I feel you deeply on that of like, I can't do just one thing at a time. I have to be like listening to music and something, or
Yeah.
you know, podcasts and audiobooks are like my savior for a lot of things. And
Oh yeah, because you
yeah.
can walk or run and you're listening also to,
Mhm.
and people talk about that sometimes negatively. They're like, oh, we always have to be consuming. We're in this culture of overconsumption. It's like maybe some of us need to be doing more than one. I can't only run. I can't just
Yeah.
think about moving.
Yeah. People are like,
I,
oh, just like run and appreciate your surroundings. I'm like, if I do that, I'm going to get bored. Yeah. Like I need that extra stimulation. Like,
Yeah, the surroundings are there's some stimulation, but they're not like
Yeah.
100% of what you probably need.
Yeah, like I can appreciate going out into the woods and nature, and
Oh,
I
for
could
sure.
definitely appreciate that, but I still need something to kind of keep me engaged in whatever task I'm trying to do. And
Did I
yeah,
answer the question? I feel like I can't remember what the chat question was because I don't.
it was just what led you to getting diagnosed,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Other med stuff
yeah,
and yeah,
and
just
I think it makes sense having those questions and that experiences that you have. Like that's a very common thing for a lot of us of like throughout life, just having these moments of questions or people saying something and
yeah.
why can't you just focus, why can't you just do this, and like recognizing like
Pulling
how
focus. You're pulling focus from other people. I think
yeah
I literally just existing in the world, behaving kind of the only way I know how to
yeah
exist and behave. And I mean, yes, to a point, you do need to learn how to be in society with other people. You do need to learn how to behave. You do need to not, do certain stuff. And but it's there's a part of that it's not offensive. It's just you. It's just how you are in the world. And people really people who are inclined to be bullies have like ESP for that. If there is something slightly different about you, they will focus in on that one tiny thing about you. And it's like they have laser vision for that thing before they know anything else about you. They have
mhm,
everything about what makes you different figured out. It's creepy. It's like all the bullies that I've ever met in my life, they couldn't be perceptive about anything else if their lives depended on it. But they can know the one thing that makes you different or that you might feel vulnerable or weak about in some way, and they will know everything about that one thing as if they have a secret manual to it. It's like, can I have that manual? I don't have that manual.
yeah. It's actually really interesting that you say that, and this might lead to more questioning for yourself, is like because there was a research study with autistic individuals and non-autistic individuals, and they did like a social experiment, and on the perceived um like perception, like the how they perceived each other, and like
Oh,
the non-autistic people tend to favor the autistic individuals less just from initial meeting, and
yeah.
so like there that's a very small study, um and there still needs to be kind of research into that kind of thing, but your experience and that study kind of they line up a bit, and it's interesting like you said that like people can spot something that's different and highlight that and use that against us in ways that really honestly make no sense. It's a lack
Yeah, you
of
can like explain it. Go
yeah,
ahead.
it's just
Sorry.
a lack of acceptance or tolerance of people, and I think it's
Yeah.
great. It's great that you are that you did this film because like that's a showing of representation and helping people accept things, and that's why representation matters. In these instances to kind of educate people and make people aware.
That's why I
Uh,
really, people get to see it because I think it stands for, not that I was necessarily trying to do some lofty thing here. I really definitely wasn't, but
yeah,
I think a helpful hint here is that I never do that. But I think, people have seen it as standing for a lot of things other than just synesthesia. And it's true that it can definitely be looked at as standing for kind of anything that we feel internally that makes us different
yeah,
from other people around us. Um, it doesn't make you better or worse than other people. It just makes you different from other people. That's something that I wish I'd understood when I was much younger, and it took me
yeah,
years to figure that out. That like there's not a value system here. It's not like, oh,
yeah,
I'm different, so that makes me like precious in some way, or I'm different, so that makes me like crappy in some way. Neither of those things are true. It's who you are as a person, and that's like a whole other set of unrelated things.
yeah. So I know you need to get going soon, but I guess we can have one more question.
Yeah.
'Cause I think it's a good, interesting one. Is, since getting diagnosed, what about your life do you feel has changed um, from having that awareness?
I think a lot of things just make more, a lot of things about me make more sense to me. I'm like, okay, well, at least I know why I'm not able to focus on this thing, or I know why I need to do this stuff simultaneously, or I kind of know why I'm um, reacting in a way that might have seemed like illogical or over the top or something at another time. It's hard to give um it's hard to give concrete examples, but there's just a million little things throughout the day, like just when you get fidgety, just when not that that's necessarily like one-to-one associated with ADHD, right? But it's definitely something that um I'm able to sort of make sense of a lot of the puzzle pieces that I wasn't necessarily able to before. And I think, if I could go back in time to like 2000, 2001, 2002, it would be very interesting to experience, not that I want to, but experience those experiences again through the lens of this diagnosis. And it is definitely not a big part of me. It's like a very, very small piece of the puzzle here, but it would be interesting to have that in place from back then and be able to say, oh, that's why this interaction happened, or that's why this particular bit of bullying occurred, or you know um it's so hard to think of a specific thing, but I think it does change a lot about, you definitely can't ascribe everything to like neurodivergence. Some of it is just like you, and it's just who you are, and it's just kind of part of the soup that makes you up. But
Yeah.
it's like there's just stuff that's just it's just you. It's like having curly hair, or wearing a green sweater. It's just like it's part of what happens to be going on. But it definitely does. I think for me it also explains to me why I'm so drawn toward certain things or people or entertainments, or kind of, I don't know if you find this in your own life. It's like, do you ever kind of look at things through the lens of neurodivergence, and you find yourself being like, oh, that's why that speaks to me. That's why I find this character or this story or this writer or this actor or this thing interesting.
I think post diagnosis, 100%.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, like the awareness is there, so I can connect to those experiences specifically. Pre diagnosis, I think there was a part of that as well, of like, but I didn't know why, right? Like I didn't have um the awareness to be like, oh, I relate to this character because of these things. This is more like I like these characters because they're, relating to me in some way, and I'm connecting to them in
It's
that
not
way.
necessarily because of our, it's
Yeah,
not, again, some of it is just like, this is me and this is what I like. This is why I like,
yeah,
sometimes there's no reason.
yeah. And I think for me, like I've really learned that like people say, well, don't make ADHD and autism like just like everything, right? Like it's not all about ADHD autism. Like, well, for me, like
It's important.
it's a part of me, right? It's a part of my
Yeah.
identity.
It's a huge part,
Yeah,
right?
it affects how I perceive the world. It affects how I communicate. It affects like my experiences around me. So like, how can I not make things about my ADHD and autism when I relate to a character or a story or how I experience music, right? Like for me,
Right.
music is such a big part of my life because like I'm one of those people that gets the goosebumps and chills when I listen to music, and like not
Some people
everyone
don't,
yeah,
don't hear it or
yeah,
anything. What's wrong with you?
yeah. And so, part of that is how I perceive the world, and like, my sensory experience, right? Like some things are painful, other things are
Yeah.
pleasing, you know?
Yeah, and you don't really know like why. It's just it's I think the neurodivergence is why, but you don't know why that thing. Like one of the
Mm.
things that I've talked about a lot since Magnetosphere came out on the platforms a few weeks ago is the fact that I found out like way after the fact. I figured out that I had synesthesia as a child, but I don't think I experienced it any longer. And I'm not the only person to sort of have that experience where it was around earlier and then seems to have sort of tapered off over time. Um, but the synesthesia that I remember, and memory is iffy, so we can't take this as gospel by any means, but what I remember was limited to one piece of music. And it wasn't a favorite piece of music. I liked it, I love it, but it's not necessarily like you can't say, this is because this is my favorite, this is why I experienced this, or it's pretty random what it seizes on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I find
And
a lot of things that are neurodivergence like related.
yeah, it's really interesting to have your own individual experience. And the work that I've been doing, like building the community through Dueling Minds and the nonprofit and like the Discord community, like talking to other people and like them also having similar experiences to mine. And then I do talk to non-autistic, non-ADHD people, and they don't have those experiences. Yeah, and it's
Very
just
different sort of, way
yeah.
of perceiving the world.
So yeah, it's just like how we perceive the world, how we experience it, and I think storytelling is one of the best ways to help people understand different experiences.
I think it's the best tool we have.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how we would know anything if not for, combination of science and people writing stories, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, people
Yeah.
writing down like other people's experiences that are not our own experience.
Yeah.
How would we, how would we know?
Yeah, and I think it's really excellent. In I know you have to get going, so
I'm okay with you here. I just, unfortunately, I scheduled a phone call in such a way that, yeah.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I very appreciate you, joining us and having this conversation. And
Appreciate you having me. I thank you again.
it was a lot of fun. And we watched the movie in the Discord, and I really enjoyed it. It was a cute movie and really interesting to see a very overt depiction of neurodivergence and like having that represented. And I think my community definitely appreciated it as well.
I really hope so. I mean, it's a movie for everybody. Like I was specifically setting out to do something that wasn't a kids movie, but that also didn't exclude children, kind of like all of the best children's entertainment. Like you look at SpongeBob or Phineas and Ferb, and here are these things that like, yes, it's a kids show, but not really,
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, because I have to say it, people can watch the movie on Prime Video in North America and on Apple TV. And if you were to Google Magnetosphere movie, all the other platforms will come. There's like 10 others that are mostly smaller, but they're out there. There's Fios and Sling and Google Play and quite a few others. But yeah, Prime and Apple are kind of the big two at the moment. And that's going to change and increase as it goes to different places around the world.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So yes, go watch the movie, and thank you for being here.
Thanks so much. This has been lovely.
Yeah.